let's get on to the review. We are talking about Metroid Prime Remastered for the Nintendo Switch, which shadow dropped digitally on February 8th following a Nintendo Direct presentation, and then it got a physical release on February 22nd of 2023. This is available only for the Nintendo Switch and is a remaster of the original Nintendo GameCube, which came out way back November 18th, 2002, only for the GameCube. Was a tremendous risk for this series because this is the first time that they'd taken this beloved side-scrolling platformer and gone into the 3D realm, and plus, there was a lot riding on this at the time because it had been an 8-year hiatus since the last Metroid game, which was Super Metroid on the Super Nintendo in 1994. They totally skipped the N64 generation for this beloved series and then came back guns blazing literally with Metroid Prime for the GameCube and also a companion title known as Metroid Fusion for the Game Boy Advance, which I love and I hope one day gets a re-release on limited run or something to that effect. It's so expensive but such a great game. But anyway, going back to Metroid Prime for the GameCube. This game was a critical darling and a smashing success. Sold 2.8 million copies, multiple Game of the Year awards, reinvented the franchise, and spawned 2 other sequels known as Metroid Prime 2 Echoes for the GameCube in 2004, and then Corruption for the Wii in 2007, eventually culminating in this sought-after trilogy for the Wii, where the original Prime got an enhanced version including nunchuck and pointer controls. So I actually used footage from the Wii version of Metroid Prime for this video to show the differences between that and the remastered version for the Switch. I'm going to say now, having finished Remastered all the way through for the Nintendo Switch, I never actually finished it on the GameCube, so this is my first time actually completing the game. I'd say for the most part it still holds up and represents one of the best games you can currently get on the Nintendo Switch, even with some of its hiccups and flaws. So let's get into an overview of the game, and I'll talk about some of the pros and the cons of Remastered, and also some tips to help you not get as frustrated as I got with this experience, because it can be frustrating at times. Even the original lead technical director, Jack Matthews from the original Metroid Prime, was griping about some of the quality of life improvements that could have been included, but were not, and I'll get into those momentarily. But if you've never played Metroid Prime, let's set it up very briefly. It is a first-person action-adventure game where you play as Samus Aran, the famed intergalactic bounty hunter who has now come upon the planet Talon 4 and has to fight space pirates and all of their genetic bioexperiments gone wrong over this beautifully created world with so much attention to detail and lore and just beautiful biomes that were just lovingly created. You could tell this was a passion project for developer Retro Studios out of Austin, Texas, who is also famous for doing Donkey Kong Country Returns on the Wii and Tropical Freeze for the Wii U. So over the course of the game, like any good Metroidvania, of course, the genre was derived from Metroid itself. You'll start out fairly underpowered, and over the course of exploration, whether it's platforming, puzzle solving, or lock-on shooting, or even morphing into the classic morph ball and setting off bombs, you'll be unlocking lots of secrets and upgrades for your suit, your arm cannon, your morph ball, your visor, which will give you more functionality as the game progresses, and you'll be able to unlock areas that were previously inaccessible as you uncover these secrets and beat bosses and upgrade your abilities. So there's a lot of circular nature to the gameplay, a lot of revisiting of old areas that you encountered once before but couldn't access, which is also going to involve a lot of backtracking, which, for better or for worse, is a staple of Metroidvania games, but the way it's used in this game kind of shows its age. And I'd say, even though that this game is getting a 95% Metacritic and 10 out of 10 scores, yes, it is definitely one of the best games on the Switch, but some of the archaic game design elements that weren't corrected kind of hold this back from being almost perfect. So in a nutshell, that's the gameplay. The sound design is moody, atmospheric, wonderfully ambient. The sound effects are excellent. I want to get into some of the pros here before I get into some of the cons, because this game has so many pros. Number one, the updated graphics are utterly gorgeous. So much attention to detail was poured into this in terms of the updated textures, the particle effects, all the little things that you can zoom in on that were just lovingly recreated from the original code. There's just so much artistic vision going into this that it truly represents one of the best looking games on the Switch. And according to some people, this should not have been possible, but they really pulled out all the stops. And it really wasn't just Retro Studios working on this remaster. They had a lot of help from a lot of other development teams, most notably Iron Galaxy. So it was a really big labor of love to bring this to that Switch hardware, which, yes, it's old, but you'd never think how old the Switch hardware is when you actually dive into all the beauty of Metroid Prime Remastered. Even though there were some things left behind, where there were some tricks on the old GameCube hardware that were possible back then that were hard to do on the modern hardware. Little things like when you go to the Chozo ruins, you won't be able to see your own reflection in some of the plates. And there were other little things like when you would fire your arm cannon down a tunnel, you'd see the reflection follow the bullet down, whereas now that's gone because of some of the different rendering systems they're using. But those are just little gripes. The overall big picture is that this game is stunning to look at, whether you're doing it on a big screen or in handheld mode. It retains a beautiful fluid 60 frames a second throughout the whole game, and this game is still a marvel to look at all these years later with all the upgrades. And then another great pro to this is the updated twin stick control scheme, which just makes the exploration, the shooting, and the platform so much more graceful, balanced, and delicate. But if you are a purist, you'll still be able to access the old GameCube control scheme, the old Wii control scheme, and a hybrid of the two. So if you really want that retro experience, you can have it. But honestly, I tried the other control schemes and I put them down pretty quickly because the new twin stick is just so joyful to play. So from a modern perspective, this game feels fantastic, in line with other modern games, and still even surpasses other modern first-person shooters. Now, let's get into some of my qualms, because this isn't a perfect game, and I think could have benefited from some tune-ups without messing with the source material too much. Number one, the backtracking in this game by modern standards is kind of atrocious. There'll be points where you find a power-up and then you have to go literally to the other side of the world to unlock a door with that power-up, whereas by this point in 2002 in Metroidvanias, fast travel was a thing. I mean, let's go back as far as Castlevania Symphony of the Night, which came out in 1997. It had those mirrors where you could warp from one side of the castle without having to slog through the whole thing. That is just not here in Metroid Prime. You have to traverse the whole map in some circumstances, which is just a time eater. And I get, this is an older game. They want to stay true to the source material. They don't want to mess with it too much. But Jack Matthews, the lead technical director of the original Metroid Prime, when I watched an interview with him, he brought up a great point that there are certain scenarios in the game, especially near the end game where you get to the Phazon Mines, where you get on these arduously long treks before you finally hit a save point. It wouldn't have been too much for Retro Studios just to insert some quality of life checkpoints at the elevators that get you to the different biomes. That would have been, in his opinion, something that would have been very simple to add and would have just reduced some of the frustration when you're doing some of these long slogs with the game. Because yeah, a fast travel really would have just reduced the frustration. And I'd also say, from a quality of life standpoint, and this is also going to lend into my tip section, there are a lot of hidden missile upgrades and health upgrades you can find scattered throughout all these different biomes that when you do find them, there's no way of remembering where you got them. There's no indicator on the map as to where they might be or where you've been. So you just have to kind of remember where you've been and consult a strategy guide if you really want to level up and get ready for these final boss battles. And that's going to be one of my first tips, is that the end game gets very brutal. The difficulty ramps up so excruciatingly when you get to the phase on mines and then the final 2 bosses that if you haven't found all the power-ups, you're going to have a tough time. So my advice to you is when you're going through this game, try when you're in a specific biome to try to get as many power-ups as you can, and also just go for all 12 artifacts. That's going to save you so much time before the final boss battles because you're really going to need to pull out all the stops. And another big tip I'm going to give you is with the one visor, you can scan different objects in the environment, not only for reading lore, but also for getting the weaknesses and strengths of the bosses. Just do that, okay? Just make sure you scan all the enemies and the bosses just to give yourself a fighting chance. But really, take the time, try to get all the missile upgrades you can, all the power bomb upgrades, and all the health units because you are going to need them. Those are just minor quibbles in what otherwise is a marvelous experience, especially considering this game came out over 20 years ago. The fact that it still holds up over other modern games is no small feat. I highly recommend this game if you own a Nintendo Switch. It is absolutely one of the best games you can get for the system. And from a future perspective, because we all know that Metroid Prime 4 has been in development hell for quite a bit, I think it was really smart to put this out this year to show that Retro Studios is still capable of doing an exemplary experience on current Switch hardware. But now it shows the fact with the Metacritic score and the strong sales that people want more Metroid Prime. So what my thought is I'm betting Metroid Prime 4 is going to be either a launch or near launch game for the next Switch hardware. Seeing how difficult it was just to get the first Metroid Prime remastered and running on the current Switch hardware, I'd say they have an even more Herculean task ahead of them when they go to the 4th game in the series. But at least the interest is there. I think they just need to wait until the hardware gets better to accommodate such a technically powerful game like this. I'm so glad this came out. I hope they remastered the other 2, but it just gets me excited for the future of the series and the fact that it's back with a bang. You've been watching episode 48 of The Collecting Confidant. Make sure you like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one whenever it happens, but it'll always be a good one. Later, Game Chasers, and peace.